Your Honor, with all due respect, my dad owns this court. Those words came out of a 17-year-old kid's mouth like he was ordering a coffee. Not nervous, not sorry, just cold confidence wrapped in a $2,000 jacket. I'm Judge Frank Capiro, and I've been on this bench in Providence Municipal Court for over 3 decades. I've seen everything. Drunk drivers who cried, repeat offenders who begged, parents who apologized for their kids. But I had never seen anything quite like Cameron Whitlock, Jr. He stood in front of me, wearing designer sunglasses indoors, a gold watch that probably cost more than most people's cars, and an expression that told me he thought this was all beneath him. If you believe justice should be equal for everyone, you'll want to see what happens next. The bailiff cleared his throat and read the docket. Case 2026 TR 84729. The State of Rhode Island versus Cameron Whitlock Jr. charges include reckless driving, endangering public safety, leaving the scene of an accident, and damage to public property. I glanced at the file, then I looked up at the young man standing before me. Mr. Whitlock, I said calmly, do you understand the charges against you? He shrugged, actually shrugged. I guess, he said. I took a breath. You guess? Yeah, I mean, it's not that serious. I set my pen down. Not that serious. Mr. Whitlock, you crashed a $60,000 sports car into a school bus carrying 23 children. Do you think that's not serious? Before he could answer, I noticed the woman sitting in the front row of the gallery. Her name was Linda Ortega, 42 years old, school bus driver for 16 years. She was wearing her work uniform because she came straight from her shift. Her hands were folded in her lap, and I could see a brace on her left wrist. Ms. Ortega, I said gently, can you please stand and tell us what happened that day? She stood slowly, and I could see her wince. Your Honor, she began, her voice soft but steady, I was driving my route like I do every morning. I had 23 kids on board, ages 6 to 12. We were stopped at a red light on Cranston Avenue when I heard this loud engine noise. Before I could even process it, something slammed into the back of my bus. Her voice cracked a little. The kids screamed. I hit my wrist on the steering wheel. The whole bus lurched forward. I thought we were going to flip. I watched her carefully. And then what happened? I got out to check on the kids first. They were crying, but thank God, none of them were seriously hurt. Then I looked at the car that hit us. It was a bright yellow sports car. A Lamborghini, I think. The front was smashed in, and the driver, she looked directly at Cameron. He got out, looked at the damage, got back in, and drove away. The courtroom was silent. He didn't stop to see if anyone was hurt? I asked. No, Your Honor, he just left. I nodded. Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Please sit down. Cameron rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes. Mr. Whitlock, I said, my tone sharpening just a bit, do you have anything to say about what Ms. Ortega just told us? He sighed like I was wasting his time. Look, I was late for a meeting. I didn't think anyone was hurt. It was just a little bump. A little bump, I repeated. Yeah, and honestly, my dad's already paying for the repairs, so I don't see what the big deal is. The gallery murmured. I heard someone whisper, unbelievable. I raised my hand, and the room went quiet again. Let's talk about what happened after you left the scene, I said. The police found you 2 hours later at a country club. Is that correct? Yeah, he said casually. I was having lunch. Having lunch, I said, while Ms. Ortega was at the hospital getting her wrist examined, while 23 terrified children were being checked for injuries. You were having lunch. He didn't even flinch. I mean, I didn't know anyone was hurt. I leaned forward. Mr. Whitlock, you didn't know because you didn't stop to find out. He smirked. Whatever. My lawyer said this would all go away. That was the first warning sign, but I stayed calm. Your lawyer isn't here today, I said. You are, and you're going to answer for what you did. I pulled out the first piece of evidence. Officer Ramirez submitted a report. He says that when he arrived at the country club to question you, you refused to cooperate. Is that true? Cameron shrugged again. I told him I'd talk to him later. I was in the middle of a business lunch. A business lunch, I repeated, at 17 years old. Yeah, I run my own crypto portfolio. I'm not some kid. I looked at the report. It says here that Officer Ramirez asked you for your license and registration, and you told him, and I quote, "Do you know who my father is?" Cameron smirked. I mean, yeah, I said that, because it's true. And who is your father? I asked. Cameron Whitlock Sr. He owns half the real estate in this state. He's donated millions to this city. He's friends with the mayor, the governor, and probably half the people in this building. The gallery murmured again. I could feel the tension rising. So you think that because your father is wealthy and well-connected, the rules don't apply to you? I didn't say that, Cameron said, but his smirk told me everything. I moved to the second piece of evidence. The prosecutor submitted text messages recovered from your phone, messages you sent after the accident. Would you like me to read them? He looked uncomfortable for the first time. I don't think that's necessary. I think it is, I said. I picked up the printed messages and read aloud. Text to someone named Brad, sent at 10:47 a.m. the day of the accident. Bro, I just hit a bus, LOL. Gonna be late to lunch. Another text, sent 5 minutes later. Don't worry, my dad will handle it. He always does. I set the paper down and looked at Cameron. His smirk was gone. Does that sound like someone who's taking this seriously? I asked. I was just joking around, he muttered. Joking around, I said. You crashed into a bus full of children, and you were joking around. Look, I said I'm sorry, okay? No, Mr. Whitlock, you haven't said you're sorry, not once. He shifted on his feet. Well, I am. Sorry, can I go now? I shook my head. We're not done yet. The third piece of evidence was the one that changed everything. Mr. Whitlock, I said, after the accident, your father hired a private investigator to look into Ms. Ortega's background. Is that correct? He hesitated. I don't know. Maybe. Don't lie to me in my courtroom, I said, my voice firm. The investigator submitted a report to the police. In that report, he detailed Ms. Ortega's financial situation, her mortgage, her credit card debt, her daughter's medical bills. Why would your father need that information? Cameron didn't answer. I'll tell you why, I said. Because 3 days after the accident, Ms. Ortega received a visit from a man claiming to represent your father. He offered her $50,000 to drop any potential lawsuit and to tell the police she wasn't seriously hurt. He told her it would be easier for everyone. The courtroom erupted. People gasped. Someone shouted, "That's bribery." I banged my gavel. "Order!" Ms. Ortega was crying now. "I didn't take the money, Your Honor. I would never. I just want justice." I looked at Cameron. His face was red. "That wasn't my idea," he said quickly. "That was my dad." "But you knew about it," I said. Yeah, I knew. But I didn't think it was a big deal." "Not a big deal," I repeated. I could feel my patience running out. "Mr. Whitlock, do you understand that attempting to bribe a witness is a crime?" "I didn't bribe anyone," he snapped. "My dad did, and you benefited from it," I said. "You stood by and let it happen because you thought your money and your last name would protect you." He pointed at me. "You don't understand. My dad has connections. He's already talking to people. This whole case is going to disappear." I stared at him. "Is that a threat, Mr. Whitlock?" "It's a fact," he said, his voice rising. "You think you're in control here? You think you have power? My dad owns half this city. He donates to campaigns. He funds buildings. He doesn't own this courtroom," I said, cutting him off. Cameron's face twisted. "Yeah? Well, maybe he should, because clearly you don't know who you're dealing with." The room went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, and then he said it. "Your Honor, with all due respect, my dad owns this court, and if you don't dismiss this case right now, you're going to regret it." 10 seconds of silence. That's how long it took for those words to sink in. 10 seconds where nobody moved, nobody breathed. The gallery was frozen. The bailiff's hand moved toward his belt. Ms. Ortega's eyes went wide. And then the room exploded. People started shouting, "Kick him out! Arrest him! Who does he think he is?" I banged my gavel 3 times. "Order! Order in this court!" The noise died down, but the tension didn't. I looked at Cameron Whitlock, Jr., and I saw something I'd seen 1,000 times before: entitlement, arrogance, a complete lack of understanding that actions have consequences. But this time, it was different, because this time, he'd crossed a line. "Mr. Whitlock," I said slowly, "let me tell you something. I've been a judge in this city for 32 years. I've presided over thousands of cases. I've seen people at their worst and their best. I've seen criminals who showed more respect than you just did. I've seen teenagers who made terrible mistakes but owned up to them. But you stand here in front of me, in front of Ms. Ortega, in front of this entire courtroom, and you think you're above the law." I paused. "You're not." Cameron opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "I don't care who your father is," I continued. "I don't care how much money he has. I don't care who he knows. In this courtroom, you are equal to every other person who stands before me. You don't get special treatment because of your last name. You don't get to walk away because your dad made a phone call." I looked him in the eye. "You crashed into a school bus, Cameron, a school bus. Do you understand what could have happened? Those children could have been killed. Ms. Ortega could have been killed. And instead of stopping, instead of helping, instead of showing even a shred of decency, you drove away. You went to lunch. You joked about it with your friends." My voice grew louder. "And then, when you got caught, instead of apologizing, instead of taking responsibility, you tried to bribe your way out of it. You let your father intimidate a witness. You stood here today and threatened me, a judge, because you thought your money would protect you." I leaned forward. "Well, Cameron, it won't. Not here, not in my courtroom." His face was pale now. The smirk was gone. His hands were shaking. "You said your dad owns this court," I said. "Let me be very clear. Your dad doesn't own anything in here. Justice isn't for sale. Not today. Not ever. Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady and firm. "First, you're going to pay a fine of $50,000. That money will go directly to Ms. Ortega to cover her medical bills, her lost wages, and the trauma you caused her and those children." Cameron's mouth dropped open. "50,000? I'm not finished," I said. "Second, your license is suspended for 2 years. Not 1, 2. And during those 2 years, you will not drive any vehicle. If you're caught driving, you'll face criminal charges." He looked like he might pass out. "Third," I continued, "you will complete 500 hours of community service. And not just any community service. You're going to work with the Providence School District every Saturday and Sunday for the next year. You're going to help maintain school buses. You're going to clean them. You're going to check their safety equipment. And you're going to do it under the supervision of Ms. Ortega." The gallery gasped. Cameron's eyes went wide. "You can't." "I can," I said. "And I am. You're going to see firsthand what it takes to keep those kids safe. You're going to understand the responsibility that people like Ms. Ortega carry every single day." I wasn't done. "Fourth, you're going to write a handwritten apology letter, not typed, handwritten. You're going to write to Ms. Ortega, to each of the 23 children on that bus, and to their families. You're going to explain what you did, why it was wrong, and what you've learned. And those letters will be reviewed by this court before your community service is complete." Cameron looked like he was about to cry. "Fifth," I said, "you're going to record a public service announcement. You're going to stand in front of a camera and tell other young drivers what you did and why they should never do the same. That video will be shown in every high school in Rhode Island. Your face, your voice, your mistake." I paused. "And finally, because you threatened this court, you're being held in contempt. Bailiff, please take Mr. Whitlock into custody. He'll spend the next 7 days in juvenile detention. After that, he'll have a review hearing to determine if he's ready to begin his community service." The bailiff stepped forward. Cameron's eyes filled with tears. No, no, you can't do this. My dad. Your dad isn't here, I said quietly. You are, and you're going to face the consequences of your actions. The bailiff put handcuffs on Cameron's wrists. He was crying now, real tears, the kind that come when reality finally sets in. Your Honor, please, he begged. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I believe you're sorry you got caught, I said. Whether you're truly sorry for what you did, we'll find out over the next year. The bailiff led him away. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Cameron's footsteps and his quiet sobs. 6 months later, I received a letter. It was handwritten, just like I'd ordered, but this one wasn't part of the assignment. This one was addressed to me. Dear Judge Capiro, I know I don't deserve your time, but I wanted to write to you anyway. When I stood in your courtroom 6 months ago, I was the worst version of myself. I thought I was untouchable. I thought money could fix everything. I was wrong. Working with Ms. Ortega has been the hardest thing I've ever done, not because the work is difficult, but because every day I see what I almost destroyed. I see the kids getting on the bus, laughing and talking, trusting that they'll get to school safely, and I think about how I could have taken that away from them. Ms. Ortega is the kindest person I've ever met. She didn't have to forgive me, but she did. She tells me that everyone deserves a second chance. I'm trying to prove her right. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I'm not the same person who said those awful things in your courtroom. I'm trying to be better. Thank you for not giving up on me. Sincerely, Cameron Whitlock, Jr. I set the letter down and looked out the window of my chambers. The sun was setting over Providence, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I thought about Cameron, about Ms. Ortega, about those 23 kids who still ride the bus every day. Justice isn't about punishment, it's about accountability. It's about teaching people that their actions matter, that their choices have consequences, and that no amount of money or privilege puts them above the law. Cameron Whitlock, Jr. came into my courtroom thinking he owned the world. He left knowing that he didn't. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most valuable lesson he'd ever learn. Because in the end, we're all equal under the law, every single one of us, and that's the way it should be.